Okay, hi, welcome back. How to Read a Book by Mortimer J. Adler and Charles Van Doren. This is the first chapter of part two, and part two is called The Third Level of Reading, Analytical Reading. Okay, this has a whole part devoted to it. As I said, it's the lengthiest part of the book that deals with a single topic. Okay, we're on chapter 6 called Pigeonholing a Book. Okay, so the main point of this chapter is the following. Okay, just as you would not enter a class without knowing what to expect of the course and the teacher. Okay, I know it sounds stupid, but no one would do that, right? But what they would do is start reading a book without knowing what the heck it is. Okay, so just like you would not enter a classroom, okay, randomly, so too should you not approach a book without knowing what it entails, right? The conventions that govern its type or its genre, and so on. Okay, you need to go in, right, knowing what to expect, just as you would to a class. Okay, so one of the very first tasks you should do as a reader is to classify a text. Okay, ideally before you start reading. Bear in mind, though, that this is not always as straightforward as it seems. Okay, because there's plenty of overlap between genres. Okay, especially these days, and he said this, or Adler said this, 50 years ago. Okay, exactly 50 years ago, 1972. We're in 2022. Okay, so yeah, so you can imagine how even more convoluted things are now. So even if you've identified a work as, say, expository, all right, which is still relatively easy to do, you must then break it down further, okay? Um, because different subjects require different approaches. All right. All right. So the easiest way to identify a book's type is to pre-read. All right. Look at the title, table of contents, author, summary, preface, index. We've talked about them. Okay. In the last chapter, the one before. Okay. Especially in expository works, the author's main contention is often stated explicitly. Okay. There's no need to hide what the author is trying to do in an expository work. Okay. So knowing what a book is about allows us to constrain our expectations, right? It allows us to ask reasonable questions, okay? Questions that are related to the genre. Um, be aware, however, that there's no clear cut, universally agreed upon method to classify books, right? Since, as I stated earlier, there's some degree of overlap, okay? Um, I remember reading a book once, In Search of Stones by, what's his name? The guy who wrote The Road Less Traveled, Scott Ampeck. Okay. He wrote a book that his editors had. It was a nightmare for his editors. Okay. If you've read it, you know, right? It's a spiritual book that's also an autobiography. That's also like you could have classified it as either one of those, right? He's talking about his own life, but it's also spiritual and okay, many things. Okay, it's also a bit of history, right? I think he was talking about the history of Britain, how these monoliths, right, these large stones, got to be where they are. Should you put that in under tour guide books? Okay, so it was all over the place. Okay, not every book is that muddled in terms of where it belongs, but it's also something to keep in mind. Okay, despite all this, most books fall into one of two broad categories. Okay, practical and theoretical. Okay, for our purposes here, practical is defined as something that instigates immediate or readily applicable action. Okay, you read it, you know what to do, right? You know what to change. While theoretical deals with knowledge, okay, i.e., that which can be understood. Okay, so there are some things you understand, some books that change the way you think about something. Other books ask you to take action. Okay, so yeah, so this further distinction, however, does not eliminate the challenge of classifying text, right? Because the terms practical and theoretical themselves overlap. Okay, so that adds to the complication. For instance, one cannot or should not act without sufficient knowledge. Okay, again, the world is more complex than we like to think. Okay, Um, so yeah, the world is not divided neatly into, now I think, now I act, now I think, now I act. Sometimes and oftentimes they happen simultaneously. Okay. It would behoove you, though, to keep an open mind and try to see how a particular author approaches his or her particular text. You can do so more effectively if you have some knowledge about the different type of text beforehand. Okay. That should go without saying. All right, that ends this chapter.